The cathedral had no roof, and the sky was a predator. Seraphine Ashford pressed her back against the cracked marble pillar. Her shawl did nothing to stop the wind from tearing through the holes in the fabric. The polar vortex screamed through the stone arches like a living thing, hungry and patient. It had been screaming for 3 hours now. Her fingers were blue, not pale. Blue, the color of something already dead. She tried to unbutton her coat with hands that wouldn't obey. Baby Ilara was crying, but the sound was getting weaker. That was worse than the screaming. Seraphine knew what silence meant. She fumbled with the brass buttons, her knuckles cracking and bleeding as she forced them through the frozen buttonholes. Please, just a little longer. The iron gate slammed shut behind her. The sound echoed through the ruins like a gunshot. Seraphine's head snapped up, her breath coming in short, visible bursts that hung in the air like ghosts. Thaddeus Grimwood stood on the other side of the bars. His thick wolf fur coat made him look twice his size. He was smiling. The kind of smile that belonged on a man watching a dogfight. The kind of smile that said he was enjoying this. He pulled a heavy key from his pocket. The metal glinted in the moonlight as he turned it in the lock. The click was final. Absolute. The sound of a coffin closing. Seraphine scrambled to her feet, clutching Ilara to her chest. She ran to the gates. Her bare feet slipped on the ice-slicked stone. She caught herself on the bars, the frozen iron burning her palms like fire. "Thaddeus, please," her voice broke. "She's just a baby." He took a long drink from his silver flask. The brandy steamed in the Arctic air. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. The heavy ring on his finger caught the light, the same ring he'd used to strike her face 3 days ago. The bruise was still fresh on her cheekbone, purple and yellow. "Nature is the only executioner I need, Seraphine." His breath came in arrogant puffs of white smoke. He tilted his head, studying her the way a man might study an insect pinned to a board. There was curiosity there, scientific interest in how long it would take. "Die quietly," he said, "so I don't have to pay for a grave." He laughed. The sound was swallowed by the wind as he turned and walked away. His boots crunched through the snow with the steady rhythm of a man who had all the time in the world, a man who was warm, a man who would sleep in a feather bed tonight while she froze. Seraphine screamed after him, but the vortex took her voice and shredded it into nothing. She shook the gates until her palms bled. The iron didn't move. It never moved. It had been built to keep things in, or keep things out. Either way, it did its job. Thaddeus disappeared into the tree line. The darkness swallowed him whole. The forest didn't care. The wind didn't care. The moon didn't care. Seraphine sank to her knees. The cold bit through her thin skirt like teeth. Ilara's crying had stopped. That was the worst sound of all, the silence. Seraphine pressed her ear to the baby's chest. She heard the faint, fluttering heartbeat. Still alive, still fighting. 6 months old and already a fighter, like her mother, like her grandmother before her. "Okay," Seraphine whispered. "Okay, we're okay." She wasn't okay. The temperature was 30 below zero and the wind was only getting stronger. The weather report had called it a polar vortex, a once-in-a-century storm, the kind that killed livestock and collapsed barns, the kind that turned exposed skin to frostbite in minutes. Seraphine crawled back to the pillar. Her legs were shaking so badly she couldn't stand. She pressed her spine against the stone and finally got the coat open. The air hit her skin like a slap, but she didn't stop. She pulled Ilara against her bare chest, skin to skin, and wrapped the coat around them both. The baby latched immediately. Seraphine felt the pull, the familiar tug that had kept Ilara alive for 6 months. But this time, it felt different, heavier, like the baby was drinking more than milk, like she was drinking warmth itself, pulling it from Seraphine's core and leaving nothing behind. Seraphine looked down and saw frost forming on her own eyelashes. Her toes were numb. She couldn't feel her left foot at all. The medical book said that was the first stage. Numbness, then confusion, then the heart slowing down, Then nothing. "Stay with me, Alara." Her voice was barely a whisper. The wind took it before it could reach the baby's ears. The memories came like fever dreams, summer afternoons in her mother's kitchen, the smell of bread rising, the heat from the ovens that made the whole house warm even in winter. Her mother's hands, always warm, always gentle, braiding Seraphine's hair while humming old songs. Her mother had died in childbirth, not with Seraphine, later. When Seraphine was 10, the baby had been a boy. He'd been born blue, silent, like Alara was now. No, not like Alara. Alara was alive. Seraphine could feel the heartbeat against her chest, fast and desperate, but alive. The memories shifted. 2 years ago. The wedding. Thaddeus had been charming then, handsome in his tailored suit. He'd smiled at her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. Her father had arranged the marriage to settle debts. The Grimwood family had money. The Ashford family had land. It was a practical arrangement, but Thaddeus had courted her anyway. Flowers, poetry, walks in the garden. He'd made her believe it could be more than practical. He'd made her believe in love. The first time he hit her, she was 3 months pregnant. She'd asked him about the gambling debts, the ones he'd promised to stop, the ones that kept growing like tumors. He'd backhanded her across the face. The ring had caught her cheekbone and split the skin open. Blood had run down her jaw and dripped onto her dress. He'd apologized afterward, brought her flowers, promised it would never happen again. It happened again and again and again. When her father died last month, he'd left everything to Seraphine, not to Thaddeus. The Northern Valley's estate, the timber rights, the mineral claims, all of it, to his daughter, to be held in trust for his granddaughter. Thaddeus had been furious. He'd screamed that it should have been his, that he'd married her for this, that she owed him. 3 days ago he'd come to her room with that smile, the dogfight smile. He'd told her to get her coat, to bring the baby. He said they were going for a drive, to see the cathedral ruins, a family outing. She'd believed him. God help her, she'd believed him. Now she was freezing to death in a cathedral with no roof while her husband drank brandy and walked away. The wind howled. Seraphine closed her eyes and tried to remember what warmth felt like, tried to hold on to the memory of her mother's hands, of summer sun, of anything that wasn't this cold that ate through her bones and turned her blood to ice. Her heartbeat was slowing. She could feel it. The rhythm becoming irregular, a drumbeat out of time. Alara kept drinking. Seraphine's head lolled to the side. She was so tired, the kind of tired that felt like falling, like sinking into deep water. She wondered if freezing to death was supposed to hurt this much. The book said you got numb, that you just fell asleep. But her lips were cracked and bleeding. Every breath was fire in her lungs. Every heartbeat was agony. The baby's cheeks were pink, alive. That was all that mattered. Seraphine forced her eyes open one more time, just to make sure Alara was still latched, still warm. The baby's tiny fist was curled against Seraphine's skin. Her dark eyes were half closed, trusting, innocent. Seraphine smiled even though it hurt, even though her lips split and bled. Then the stone floor began to hum. It wasn't a sound. Not exactly. It was a vibration, deep and old, like the earth itself was waking up, like something ancient was stirring in the bones of the cathedral. Seraphine felt it in her spine, in the base of her skull, in the marrow of her freezing bones. The wind didn't stop, but something in the air changed, the quality of it, the weight. The shadows between the gargoyles above stretched down like fingers, reaching for the ground, reaching for her. Seraphine's breath caught. The darkness wasn't empty anymore. It was full, heavy, alive. She watched as the shadows pooled near the high altar, gathering into a shape that was too tall, too still to be human. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees, but this cold was different, controlled, deliberate, like the difference between a blizzard and a scalpel. A man stepped out from behind the altar. Number, not a man. something wearing the shape of one. He was tall, at least 6'4". His frame was wrapped in a cloak that seemed to be made of trapped smoke and starlight. The fabric didn't move with the wind. It moved against it. Like the vortex itself was afraid to touch him. His skin was pale, but not the blue-white of frostbite. It was the color of marble, of something carved and perfect and utterly inhuman. His eyes glowed, not with fire, with something colder, like dying stars, like the last light before the universe ends. Dorian Frostborn stood at the edge of the altar, his head tilted as if listening to something Seraphine couldn't hear. His fingers were long and claw-like, but they moved with surgical gentleness as he adjusted the collar of his cloak. He didn't look like a savior. He looked like a storm in the shape of a man. Seraphine tried to move, but her body wouldn't obey. She was too cold, too far gone. She could only watch as he descended the steps, each footfall silent despite the ice. The snow around him didn't fall. It hovered in mid-air, waiting for permission. He stopped 3 feet away. Seraphine looked up. She expected a predator, expected teeth and hunger and the final darkness, expected to die with her daughter in her arms while some monster fed. But the wind stopped, just stopped. The air around her suddenly felt like a summer afternoon, warm and thick and impossible. She gasped, her lungs filled with heat instead of ice. Actual heat, like standing next to an oven, like her mother's kitchen on baking day. Elara stirred against her chest. The baby made a small sound, not crying, just breathing, just alive. Dorian crouched down. His cloak pooled around him like liquid shadow. Up close, Seraphine could see that his eyes weren't glowing. They were burning. A slow, controlled fire that never consumed, that never went out. He studied her face. Then the baby. His expression was unreadable, ancient, like looking at a statue that had stood for 1,000 years and would stand for 1,000 more. A heartbeat this loud is a sin in a house of the dead. His voice was low. Each word deliberate, measured, like he was weighing them before he spoke. Why do you give your life to a creature that cannot even say your name? Seraphine's throat was too dry to answer. She tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. Her tongue was frozen, her lips cracked and bleeding. Dorian's gaze dropped to her mouth, then to the baby nursing at her chest. Something flickered across his face, not pity, something older than pity, something that looked almost like recognition. He reached out. Seraphine flinched, but his hand didn't touch her. It hovered above Elara's head. The air around the baby shimmered with warmth. The frost on Seraphine's skin began to melt, turning to steam. She felt sensation returning to her toes, to her fingers. The pain was excruciating, but it meant she was alive. It meant blood was flowing again. "She's my daughter." The words came out broken, barely audible. That's why. Dorian's eyes flared brighter. He stood in one fluid motion. His cloak swept out like wings, the warmth intensified, wrapping around Seraphine and Elara like a living thing, like arms holding them, protecting them. Seraphine realized with a start that the heat wasn't coming from the air. It was coming from him, from the cloak, from the shadows that obeyed his will like trained hounds. "The man who locked you here." His voice was colder than the vortex now, colder than the wind, colder than death. "He smells of brandy and cowardice." Seraphine nodded. Her teeth were still chattering, but she could move her jaw now, could feel her face again. "Thaddeus Grimwood, he wants my inheritance. He will not have it." It wasn't a promise. It was a fact. As certain as gravity, as inevitable as sunrise. Dorian turned toward the iron gates. The shadows followed him like loyal dogs. Seraphine watched as he raised one hand. His fingers spread wide. The snow in the air began to move, swirling in a tight spiral around the gates, around the broken walls. Ice turned to something else. Ice turned to something else. Something that glowed faintly amber in the moonlight. Seraphine realized with a shock that he was repairing the cathedral, not with stone, with ice. The broken arches were filling in. The gaps in the walls were sealing with crystalline precision. The wind outside howled louder. But inside the walls, the air was still, warm, safe. Dorian lowered his hand. The glow faded to a soft ember light. He turned back to Seraphine. His expression was unreadable again, marble and moonlight. She was still holding Alara. The baby had fallen asleep, her tiny mouth still against Seraphine's skin, but no longer drinking, just resting, just warm. Seraphine's heartbeat was steady now, strong. She met his burning gaze and saw something she didn't expect. Fury, not at her, at Thaddeus. At the injustice of a mother sacrificing her warmth for a child who couldn't speak. At men who locked gates and walked away, smiling. Dorian took a step closer. He was offering his hand. "Can you stand?" Seraphine looked at his palm. The skin was smooth, unlined, ageless. She hesitated, then reached out with her free hand. Her fingers were still shaking, but they worked. They obeyed. His fingers closed around hers. The warmth intensified. He pulled her to her feet with effortless strength, steadying her when her legs threatened to give out. "Thank you." The words felt inadequate, insufficient, but they were all she had. Dorian didn't respond. He was looking past her now, at something behind the sealed gates. Seraphine followed his gaze and saw footprints in the snow outside, fresh ones, leading back from the tree line. Thaddeus had returned. He was standing just beyond the gates. His flask was forgotten in the snow at his feet. His face was pale. His eyes were wide with something that looked like terror. He was staring at the cathedral, at the ice, at the impossible warmth radiating from the ruins, at Dorian, at the thing that should not exist. Dorian smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was not meant for the living. It was the smile of something ancient and patient and absolutely certain, the smile of winter itself, the smile of the cold that outlasts kingdoms and kings and everything that thinks it can survive forever. Thaddeus stumbled backward. His boots slipped on the ice. The flask fell from his hand. The brandy hissed as it hit the frozen ground. Steam rose like a ghost. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out, only a thin wheeze, like air escaping from something punctured. Dorian reached for the clasp at his throat. His fingers moved with surgical precision, unfastening the heavy bronze pin that held the cloak in place. The fabric slid from his shoulders like liquid shadow, revealing a frame that was too perfect to be human. His shirt was black silk, tailored to a body that didn't breathe, didn't age, didn't die. He held the cloak out to Seraphine. "This will not fail you." She stared at the offered fabric. Up close, she could see that it wasn't made of smoke. It was woven from something that looked like captured starlight, like the threads of winter itself. But the interior was different. The lining was fur, deep midnight black fur that seemed to pulse with its own light, like it had a heartbeat. She reached out with trembling fingers and touched it. Heat exploded through her hand, not painful, not burning, just pure, impossible warmth that spread up her arm and into her chest like liquid gold, like summer sun concentrated into fabric. She gasped. Her eyes went wide. Dorian's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those burning eyes. Satisfaction, maybe, or recognition, or memory. "Take it." Seraphine shifted Alara in her arms, trying to figure out how to accept the cloak without dropping the baby. Dorian saw her struggle. He stepped closer. His hands were cold when they touched her shoulders, but his movements were gentle, careful. He draped the cloak around both of them, wrapping the fabric so it cocooned mother and child together. The warmth was instant, agonizing, beautiful. Seraphine felt the needles of returning circulation vanish as if they'd never existed. The blue tint in her fingers faded to pink. Sensation returned to her toes in a rush that made her gasp. She looked down and saw that the fur lining was glowing faintly, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. What is this? A gift from a queen who no longer needs it. Dorian's voice was soft now, almost gentle, the cloak of the eternal hearth. It will keep you warm until the stars go dark. Seraphine pulled the fabric tighter, marveling at the weight of it. The cloak was massive, designed for someone much larger than her, but it didn't feel heavy. It felt like being held, like being protected by something ancient and absolute and utterly unbreakable. Ilara stopped fussing entirely. The baby settled against Seraphine's chest, her tiny fist curled into the fur, safe, warm, alive. Seraphine looked up at Dorian, searching his face for some hint of why he was doing this, why he cared. But his expression was unreadable, alien. He was watching her the way a sculptor might watch marble, deciding where to make the first cut. Behind him, beyond the sealed gates, Thaddeus was still standing in the snow, still staring, still frozen with terror at what he was seeing. Dorian's smile returned, sharp as broken glass, cold as the void between stars. "You're not human," Seraphine said. "No. What are you?" "The thing your husband should have feared more than poverty." For just a moment, as Dorian turned toward the gates where Thaddeus stood paralyzed, Seraphine saw something flash across his face. A memory. A ghost. The image of a woman with blonde hair and a baby in her arms. Both of them frozen. Both of them dead. Both of them lost 500 years ago in snow that looked just like this. Then it was gone, and there was only winter, only justice, only the cold that never forgives. Seraphine had forgotten what it felt like to be warm. The cloak wrapped around her and Ilara like a cocoon of summer. The fur lining pulsed against her skin with gentle heat. Not burning, not suffocating, just perfect. Like sitting by a hearth on a winter evening. Like her mother's kitchen when the bread was baking. She could move her fingers now, flex them without the cracking pain of frostbite. Her toes tingled as blood returned to places that had been dead minutes ago. She took a full breath and felt her lungs expand without the stabbing cold. Ilara slept against her chest. The baby's breathing was steady, deep, safe. Dorian stood with his back to them, facing the sealed gates where Thaddeus still stood frozen in the snow. His black silk shirt caught the amber light from the ice walls. The cathedral had transformed around them. What had been ruins was now a fortress. The broken arches were whole again. The shattered stained glass was replaced with crystalline ice that refracted moonlight into gold and crimson and deep ocean blue. It was beautiful, impossibly beautiful, like standing inside a frozen star. Seraphine adjusted the cloak around Ilara's sleeping form. The baby's cheeks were pink now, healthy, alive. 6 months old, and she'd almost died tonight. 6 months old, and her father had locked her in a tomb and walked away laughing. "Why?" The word came out before Seraphine could stop it. Dorian didn't turn around. He stood perfectly still, a statue carved from winter itself. "Why did you save us?" The silence stretched, long enough that Seraphine thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke. His voice was quiet, almost too quiet to hear over the wind that still howled outside the ice walls. "Because I failed someone like you, 500 years ago, and I have carried that failure every night since." He turned, those burning eyes fixed on her, through her, seeing something she couldn't see, someone she'd never met. "Sit," he said. "Rest, and I will tell you about a queen who died in the snow." Seraphine sank down against the pillar. The marble was warm now. Everything was warm. The cloak, the air, the stone beneath her. It felt like a dream, like she'd died in the cold, and this was whatever came after. Dorian moved to the altar. He didn't walk. He glided, like gravity was optional for him. He sat on the stone steps, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. For just a moment, he looked almost human, almost tired. Her name was Ravenna. The cathedral around them began to change. The amber light dimmed. Shadows gathered at the edges, and in those shadows, images formed. Ghosts of memory, pieces of a story 5 centuries old. Seraphine saw a castle, not ruins, not ice. Actual stone and mortar and banners flying from turrets. She saw snow falling. Gentle at first, then harder, then a blizzard that swallowed the world. Ravenna was Queen of Winterkeep, married to King Aldrich, a political arrangement. She brought land, he brought armies, neither brought love. The shadows showed a woman, blonde hair, blue eyes, pale skin. She wore a crown of silver and held her swollen belly with both hands. 8 months pregnant, maybe 9. Seraphine's breath caught. The woman looked like her, not identical, but close enough. Same coloring, same age, same desperate hope in her eyes. Aldrich gambled, Dorian continued. Cards, dice, fights. He lost more than he won. The debts grew. In one drunken night, he bet the kingdom itself, and lost. The shadows showed a man throwing down cards with shaking hands, nobles leaning back with satisfied smiles. The lords gave him a choice. Pay or surrender the throne. He had no gold, so he did what cowards do. He found someone else to blame. The shadows showed Aldrich screaming at Ravenna, grabbing her by the arm, dragging her through corridors while she begged. He took her to ruins outside the castle, an old burned cathedral, no roof, no doors, just broken walls and ice and wind. He locked her inside, 9 months pregnant, in the middle of a winter storm. Dorian's hands clenched. I was her guard, new to this curse, only 50 years turned. I loved her from a distance, the way guards love queens, hopeless, silent, eternal. The shadows showed a younger Dorian, less marble, more human, standing in armor behind Ravenna's chair, watching her with eyes that said everything. When I heard what Aldrich had done, I ran, as fast as I could, but I was too late. The shadows showed Dorian running, not gliding, just desperate. He burst through the forest, reached the cathedral, tore the gates open with bare hands, and found her dead, both of them, mother and child, frozen in each other's arms. The shadows showed Ravenna against a pillar, eyes closed, peaceful, the baby blue-lipped in her embrace. I knelt in the snow beside her, and I screamed until the walls shook. I was a vampire, powerful, immortal, and I couldn't save one woman, one child. He looked at Seraphine, really looked at her, so I took her cloak, and I wove magic into it. Her last breath, the winter's cold, my own curse, all of it together. Warmth that would never fail, protection that would never break. The shadows showed him working, kneeling in the cathedral, hands moving over fabric, ice forming, magic flowing. It took me a year to complete. The cloak of the eternal hearth. I've carried it for 500 years, waiting for someone worthy. He stood, walked toward Seraphine, knelt so they were eye level. You're not her, but you remind me of why I keep trying, because sometimes we get a second chance. A sound cut through the silence. Boots, on snow, getting closer. Dorian's head snapped toward the gates. His eyes flared red. The temperature dropped 5 degrees. He's come back, your husband. And he's brought friends. Seraphine scrambled to her feet. Through the translucent ice walls, she could see shapes moving. 3 of them. Thaddeus in his wolf fur coat, and 2 larger men carrying torches and crowbars. Outside the cathedral, Thaddeus pulled a folded parchment from his coat. The inheritance deed, signed by Seraphine's father, naming her sole heir to northern valleys, but only if she survives to claim it. He turned to the henchmen. Once we're inside, find the bodies. I need confirmation they're dead, frozen solid, no questions from the magistrate. And if they're not dead, one asked, then we finish what the cold started. Thaddeus's jaw tightened. That estate is worth 50,000 pounds. I'm not losing it because my wife was too stubborn to freeze. He gripped the crowbar. And grab anything valuable. Jewelry. That cloak, if it's intact, we can sell it in the southern markets. No one will ask where it came from." The henchman nodded. "As you say, sir." Thaddeus approached the glowing ice wall. Through the translucent barrier, he saw movement, a figure, standing. Impossible. His blood ran cold. "She should be dead." "Someone's in there," the second henchman whispered. Thaddeus's hand tightened on the crowbar. "I don't care who it is. That's my property. Break it open." Inside, Seraphine heard every word. The cloak had heightened her senses. She could hear Thaddeus's voice, his greed, his cold calculation. "He came back to loot my corpse," she whispered. Dorian's smile was sharp. "Let him come. Men who abandon mothers to winter learn what real cold means." "Take the child," Dorian said. "There's a room behind the altar. Go there, now. What about you?" "I will handle this." Seraphine looked down at Alara. Still sleeping, still warm, still innocent. She couldn't let the baby see what was coming. She ran. The cloak billowed behind her like wings. She found the door, small, almost invisible. She pushed through into darkness and pressed her back against the wall. The door shut. Thick wood. Old. Strong. She could still hear them, muffled, distant. But there, the ice barrier shattered. Not all at once, just a section, large enough for a man to step through, then another. Then all three of them were inside the cathedral. "You," Thaddeus's voice cut through the air, "you're supposed to be dead." Silence. Then Dorian's voice, cold as the void between stars. "Many things are supposed to be. Few things are. Who are you? What is this place?" "I am the cold that outlasts kingdoms, the winter that buries empires. And this place is a sanctuary which you have violated." The torchbearer spoke, his voice shaking. "Boss, maybe we should go. This don't feel right." "We're not leaving," Thaddeus snapped. "That cloak, that glowing cloak she's wearing, it's worth a fortune. We take it and go. The cloak is not yours to take." "I don't care what you think you are, old man. That's my wife, my daughter, my inheritance. All of it, mine. Your wife froze while you drank. Your daughter nearly died while you smiled. The inheritance is not yours. It never was. It never will be." Footsteps, heavy boots on ice. The henchmen were spreading out. "Thaddeus," one of them said. "His eyes. Look at his eyes. That ain't natural. I said we're not leaving." The torch went out, not flickered, not dimmed, extinguished. Like someone had reached out and crushed the flame between invisible fingers. The torchbearer yelled, dropped the stick. It hit the ground with a clatter. The wood was already covered in frost. In seconds, it was white, frozen solid. The temperature plummeted. Seraphine felt it even through the door, through the cloak. The warmth faltered. Just for a moment. Just enough to make her breath visible. Alara whimpered. Seraphine pulled the cloak tighter, rocked the baby gently, outside. In the cathedral. Men were screaming, not Dorian. He didn't raise his voice at all. The temperature dropped. Frost spread across the henchmen's boots, freezing them to the floor. "We can't move," one screamed. "Our feet!" Dorian's eyes burned brighter. The air shimmered with cold. "You brought fire to a sanctuary, iron to a place of peace, violence to where mothers seek safety." His hand rose. The frost climbed their legs, knees, thighs. "Please, we're just hired. We didn't know." Dorian tilted his head. "Now you do." He gestured. The frost shattered. The two men scrambled away on hands and knees, their boots left behind, frozen to the floor. They ran barefoot into the snow, screaming, disappearing into the trees. Only Thaddeus remained. Dorian took a step forward. Ice spread from his footprint in spiraling patterns across the floor. "Please," Thaddeus gasped. His voice had changed. The bravado was gone. Only fear now. "Please. I didn't know. I didn't know there was magic. I just needed the money. The debts. They were going to kill me. So you killed your wife instead. Tried to. Left her and your infant daughter to freeze while you drank brandy and walked away, smiling. I was desperate. You don't understand. I understand perfectly." Dorian's voice dropped to a whisper, but it carried like thunder. I am older than your bloodline, Thaddeus Grimwood, older than your kingdom, older than the mountains themselves. He took another step. The air around him shimmered with frost. The cold obeys me because it knows I am colder. Thaddeus fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry. God, I'm sorry. My father. He beat me every day I couldn't pay his debts. I swore I'd never be powerless again. But I became him. I became the monster. You had a choice. Every time you hit her, every time you gambled, every time you chose yourself over them, those were choices. A sound from the sanctum. The door opening. Seraphine stepped out, Elara wrapped in the glowing cloak. Thaddeus looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. Seraphine, please, tell him I'm sorry. Seraphine walked toward him slowly, stopped just out of reach, looked down at the man who'd promised to love her, to protect her, to cherish her forever. You're right, she said. You made a mistake. She turned to Dorian, those burning eyes watching, waiting, giving her the choice. Can you freeze him without killing him? Dorian tilted his head. Yes. His heart would beat once per hour. His lungs would fill once per day. He would be aware, conscious, trapped forever. Seraphine looked back at Thaddeus, at the terror in his eyes. Do it! The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Do it! Thaddeus's eyes went wide. His mouth opened. A sound came out that wasn't quite a scream. Not yet. Just the beginning of one. Wait, his voice cracked. Please, Seraphine. I'm your husband, the father of your child. You can't... I'm not your wife anymore, and you stopped being a father the moment you locked that gate. But I was desperate. The debts. My father beat me. I understand that you were hurt. I understand that you were broken. But you had a choice. Every time you hit me, every time you gambled away our money, every time you chose yourself over us. Those were choices. And tonight, when you locked us in here to die, that was a choice too. She adjusted Elara in her arms. The baby was stirring now, waking up, those dark eyes blinking open. You wanted me to feel cold forever. You wanted me to die slowly. Knowing my daughter was dying with me, that was your choice. So this is mine. She turned to Dorian. Freeze him. Let him know what he tried to give us. Forever. Dorian raised one hand. His fingers spread wide. The shadows gathered. The temperature dropped, not everywhere, just around Thaddeus. A sphere of cold so absolute it made the blizzard outside feel like spring rain. No. Thaddeus tried to pull his hands free, but they were locked to the ice. No, please, God, please. I'm sorry. I'll change. I'll be better. The ice spread from his hands, up his wrists, his forearms, creeping across his skin like frost on a window, white at first, then blue, then translucent. Thaddeus screamed. The sound echoed through the cathedral, bouncing off the ice walls, multiplying. Seraphine didn't look away. She made herself watch, made herself see what justice looked like. Elara buried her face against her mother's chest, too young to understand. The ice reached Thaddeus's shoulders, his neck. He was still screaming, still begging. Then the ice touched his jaw, his mouth, his lips. The screaming stopped, not because he'd stopped trying. Seraphine could see his throat working, but no sound came out. The ice had sealed his voice. His eyes were the last to go, wide, terrified, aware, staring at her with pure horror. Then the ice covered them, a thin film. He could still see, but he couldn't blink, couldn't look away. The ice continued down, into the floor. Thaddeus sank, not falling, just descending as the ice transformed the stone beneath him. The cathedral floor became transparent, clear as glass, and Thaddeus was sinking into it like a man drowning in a frozen lake. Dorian lowered his hand. The sphere of cold dissipated. The temperature returned to warmth. Seraphine stepped forward, looked down through the ice floor. Thaddeus was suspended 3 feet below the surface, perfectly preserved, his arms spread wide, his mouth open in that silent scream, his eyes staring up at her. Can he? He feels everything, Dorian said. The cold, the pressure, the passing of time. His heart beats once every hour. His lungs fill once every day. He is alive, aware, and he will remain so until the stars burn out. How long is that? Forever. Seraphine knelt, pressed her palm flat against the ice above Thaddeus's face. The surface was warm, like sun-baked stone. You wanted the inheritance. Now you are the foundation. Every step I take presses down on you. Every breath Elara takes reminds you of the warmth you tried to steal. You will hold up our world until there is no world left to hold. Thaddeus's eyes moved, just barely, showing he understood, showing he was still in there, still aware, still suffering. Seraphine stood. She felt relief, hollow but real. He couldn't hurt them anymore. The cycle was broken. She looked at Dorian. What happens now? Now you rest. The storm will pass by morning. And then you walk out of here as something more than you were when you walked in. Seraphine felt exhaustion hit her, the adrenaline draining away. She sank down against the pillar. The cloak wrapped around her and Elara like protective arms. She closed her eyes, just for a moment. Through the ice walls she could see blue. Through the ice walls she could see blue sky, white snow sparkling like diamonds. The world looked clean, new. You're awake. She turned. Dorian was by the altar. He looked the same, ageless, perfect, terrifying. The storm passed. It did. She looked around. The ice walls were solid now. The amber light had softened to gold and honey. The cathedral was a fortress, a sanctuary. Dorian crossed to her, extended his hand. She took it, let him pull her to her feet. Come, there's something you need to see. He led her to a window high in the wall, framed by ice that refracted sunlight into rainbows. Seraphine looked out and gasped. The city below was covered in pristine snow. Beautiful. And in the distance, she could see the Northern Valley's estate, the towers rising above the tree line. It's yours again, Dorian said. What? The ledgers have been rewritten, the deeds transferred, the debts erased. You are the Duchess of the Northern Valleys, as you always should have been. How? I am old, Seraphine, 500 years old. The old have influence in places the young cannot reach. She looked down at her hands, clean now, healed, strong. Why? Why did you do all this? Dorian was silent, then spoke softly. Because 500 years ago, I watched a queen die in the snow while her court drank wine and pretended not to hear. I watched her freeze with her unborn child, and I was too late. He looked at her, the weight of centuries in his eyes. I will not watch it happen again. I will not be too late again. I will not fail again. Seraphine felt tears fall. For Ravenna, for the child who died 500 years ago, for all the mothers who'd frozen. Thank you. But Dorian didn't turn away immediately. He knelt in front of Elara. The baby was awake, staring at him with curious eyes. Dorian reached out, touched her cheek with one finger, gentle against her soft skin. Be stronger than your mother, he whispered. Be fiercer than your father. Be kinder than either. Elara giggled, grabbed his finger with both tiny hands. For just a moment Dorian's face softened. Something almost human, something like hope. He stood, looked at Seraphine. You saved yourself, you know. I merely gave you the tools. Then he walked into shadows. But before he vanished, he turned back. I will watch over you, both of you, always. And then he was gone. Seraphine looked down at Elara. The baby yawned, stretched. Come on, little one, let's go home. She walked toward the entrance. The barrier melted as she approached. The gate swung open. She paused at the threshold, looked back one more time, searching shadows for Dorian. But he was gone. She stepped out into snow. The path down was clear, stone steps leading toward the city, toward the estate, toward her life. Halfway down, she paused. The path was no longer stone. It was ice, clear ice, stretching from cathedral to city. And beneath it, frozen in stillness, was Thaddeus's face. his eyes open, staring up with absolute terror. Seraphine looked down at him, at the man who tried to kill her and her daughter. She stepped forward. Her foot pressed down on the ice above his face. The surface warmed beneath her soul, supporting her, just as Dorian promised, just as Thaddeus would do for eternity. She kept walking. Behind her, the cathedral stood silent, a fortress of ice and justice. The city gates opened. Guards stepped aside, eyes widening at the cloak. "Your Grace," one said, bowing. "We thought you were dead?" "I was. Almost. But not quite." She walked past them, into the city, up the hill, past the merchant quarter. The Northern Valley's estate rose before her. Home. Servants waited at the door. Mrs. Halloway, Mr. Brennan, all of them lined up. "Your Grace," Mrs. Halloway said, "we feared the worst. Master Grimwood is no longer with us, and he will not be returning." Relief on their faces. They'd known. All of them. "I am Duchess of the Northern Valleys. This is my daughter, Ilara, and this house will be a place of safety, of warmth, for us and for anyone who needs it." She climbed stairs to her chambers, set Ilara in the cradle. The baby yawned, settled. Seraphine wrapped the cloak around herself, looked out at the city, at the cathedral in the distance, at the path of ice connecting them. And somewhere beneath it all, Thaddeus stared upward, aware, trapped, forever beneath the feet of the woman he'd tried to kill. Justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was just cold. 1 year later, on Ilara's first birthday, Seraphine stood in the great hall, surrounded by women, 12 of them, mothers seeking refuge, seeking protection. The estate had become a sanctuary, a place where women fleeing violence could find safety, where children could grow without fear. Dorian had visited twice that year. The first time was spring. Seraphine woke to find him in the nursery, watching Ilara sleep, his hand hovering above the cradle. "She'll be strong," he said, "like her mother." "Like her godfather," Seraphine replied. Dorian's hand lowered. He pressed one finger to Ilara's palm. The baby's hand closed around it, and frost spread from their touch. Delicate, beautiful, warm. The second visit was autumn, during Harvest Festival. 12 mothers lived in the estate now, 12 children running through halls that once echoed with violence. "You've built something good here," Dorian said, standing in the doorway. "We built it," Seraphine corrected. "You gave us the foundation." "No, you chose to survive. I merely removed the obstacle." "Then, thank you for removing obstacles." Dorian's smile was small, rare. He does feel every step, every footfall, every breath of warmth above him. Good. And then he faded, like smoke, leaving only the faint scent of snow. Now, on Ilara's first birthday, the baby took her first steps on marble floor, with 12 mothers watching, 12 women who'd survived, who'd chosen life. Ilara wobbled, fell, got up, tried again. And with each step somewhere below, Thaddeus felt the pressure, felt the weight, felt life continuing without him. 3 months later, Seraphine was putting Ilara to bed, 18 months old now, walking, babbling, starting words. "Mama," Ilara said, reaching for the cloak on the wall, warm. "Yes, sweetheart. It keeps us safe." She wrapped Ilara in a blanket, laid her in the cradle. The baby yawned. Her tiny hand reached out, touched the wooden frame. Frost spread from her fingertips. Not cold frost, warm frost, glowing amber in candlelight, spiraling across wood in patterns like flowers, like roses made of ice and starlight. Seraphine's breath caught. Ilara looked up. Her eyes were burning, gold and amber and ancient fire. Just like Dorian's. Then she blinked, and they were dark again. Normal, just a child's eyes. But the frost remained. Beautiful, impossible, proof. The gift had passed to her daughter. Seraphine sat heavily, hand trembling as she touched the ice patterns. They were warm, like the cloak, like Dorian's magic. She looked out the window, at the cathedral silhouette, at shadows moving between trees. A knock on the door. "Your Grace?" Mrs. Halloway's voice. "Is everything all right?" Seraphine covered the frost with her hand. It melted instantly. "Everything's fine. Just putting Ilara to bed." She looked down at her sleeping daughter, at the tiny fist curled against blanket, at the future Duchess who would grow up with ice in her veins and fire in her eyes, just like her godfather. Outside, beneath the window, Dorian Frostborn watched. A smile touched his features. Not the cold smile for enemies, something warmer, something like hope. The cycle wasn't broken. It was transformed. He faded into night, leaving footprints in snow, footprints that filled with ice flowers as he walked. Somewhere beneath the frozen path, Thaddeus's eyes tracked movement above, felt Dorian's steps, and understood the punishment would last far longer than his lifetime. The child would inherit her mother's strength and her godfather's cold, and she would walk over him forever. Inside the nursery, Seraphine whispered to sleeping Ilara, "He'll teach you, when you're ready, when the cold calls to you. He'll come." She pulled the cloak tighter around herself, felt its warmth, its protection, its promise. The stars burned overhead, patient, eternal, waiting for the child to grow, waiting for the magic to bloom, waiting for the next chapter of a story that would outlast kingdoms. The Cathedral of Forgotten Saints stood silent on the mountain, no longer ruins, a sanctuary now, the seventh in a network that stretched across frozen lands, places where mothers were saved and monsters were punished, and the cold answered to justice older than memory. And deep beneath its ice floor, Thaddeus Grimwood stared upward into darkness, feeling every snowflake that fell, every footstep that pressed down, every breath of warmth that reminded him of what he'd lost, forever aware, forever conscious, forever frozen in the foundation of the world he'd tried to destroy. The cloak would keep them warm until the stars went dark, and the stars were in no hurry to die.